Let's go over to the SEC. Let's go to Atlanta. We have the Texas Longhorns, number 2, excuse me, in the latest college football playoff rankings. 2.5-point favorites against the number 5 Georgia Bulldogs. Before we really start breaking this game down, did this line surprise you guys when it came out that Texas was 2.5-point favorites on a neutral field?
Not for me. I think Texas has been building a whole lot of momentum. Yes, they played with their food against Kentucky a little bit.
And
But guys, I think
Arkansas and A&M and
well, and listen, I think I didn't get to be on the live show because I was stuck in traffic, but I think the only thing that's holding Texas back from winning a national championship, quite honestly, is Quinn Ewers. If he can stop with the red zone turnovers, which Texas, for all of their strengths, converting touchdowns in the red zone is not one of them. They've got to tighten that up. But aside from that, they were an insanely complete team to my eyes on the field. And we've seen Georgia just be so up and down as far as, hey, we can move the football one week and then suddenly we have no answers offensively. To me, I just look at the resumes and think, even though Georgia has had the infinitely tougher schedule, I find myself trusting the Longhorns a little bit more week over week. And so this line doesn't necessarily surprise me. It's why I'm going to take the Longhorns minus the points in Atlanta.
I'm going to be a little bit boring here. I'm going to say that Georgia finds a way to win the SEC again because this is number one, it's just kind of who they are. They've built it up. This isn't surprising to them. Number two, this is basically a home game. It's almost like a home game on steroids because, they get to play this in their backyard in the biggest city in their state, right? So it's, I know Atlanta's not technically their home city, but it's a massive advantage for them being in Atlanta. And the other thing I want to say is, we saw how this game played out the first time. It wasn't particularly close. It was at Texas. Yes, there were lots and lots of mistakes, but I think we've kind of seen that from Texas is they've made some mistakes in a lot of games this year. They just haven't played a team who's made them pay for them yet outside of the Georgia Bulldogs. The Georgia Bulldogs took those mistakes and, they took the arm and they put them in the arm bar and they made them tap, right? That's kind of what they ended up doing to Texas the first time around. It's going to be a lot harder to throw trash on the field to overturn a call, so it's going to be maybe a little bit tougher for Texas in this one. Of course, a little bit of a jest there. I just think this is too good of a Georgia team that knows how to win. They played some tough spots. They've been in some absolute dogfights, no pun intended. They shouldn't have been in a dogfight with Georgia Tech, but rivalries get like that sometimes. And for the effort that Haynes King gave in that game, Georgia found a way to overcome it. They are not a complete team. They're not perfect. They're not by any means, they're not a juggernaut like they have been in the past, but they're good enough and they have good enough players and they have a good enough defense and they have a good enough pass game that I think they're going to find a way to get it done and win this game in Atlanta.
I'm going to take Georgia to win this game as well. Couple reasons here. I don't know how much Texas has to play for in this one. Obviously, and I love your guys' thoughts on this. Obviously, they'd love to win the SEC year one. Obviously, they'd love, just from a personal pride standpoint, to erase their one loss this year and avenge that one loss. Obviously, those are great things to play for. If you don't think Kirby Smart is telling his team that they will not be in the college football playoff if they lose this game, you're crazy. He looks for any sort of slight, any sort of motivation that he can. He is 110% telling his team that they will not be in the college football playoff if they lose this game because they lost the SEC championship last year and were left out of the 14 college football playoff. So, right or wrong, obviously they're going to.
We all agree that's wrong, right? Like,
we all agree that's wrong. Yes, but
Kirby Smart doesn't.
Kirby Smart will use whatever he can to motivate his football team and try to turn them into an underdog whenever they can. So that's one thing. I think Georgia feels like they might have to play for a little bit more than Texas. Mitch, I can tell you're really excited to weigh in on that, so I'll let you do that before I finish that point.
Well, I completely agree with you on Georgia. The thing I was going to disagree with is that Texas doesn't have anything to play for. I think if they want to be an elite team, and I think Sarkisian certainly has them moving towards that direction, whether you feel like they are a complete elite team yet or not, there's no way that this Texas team is qualifying this weekend that, oh, well, we have the playoff to look forward to. And so, this game doesn't matter. I think absolutely the narrative building up to this season was that Texas will not be ready. Texas is going to get shoved in a locker by all of this physicality and speed in the SEC. And they've turned that narrative right around, right? I mean, I had to hear it as I walked out of Kyle Field, the SEC chants ring into my ears from the Longhorn fans that did travel. It feels like Texas is trying to build towards something special, and whether it's this year or another year down the line, national championship considerations are right around the corner for the Longhorns. So I think they're going to be perfectly ready to play. Now, to say that you're going to take Georgia because Georgia might be extra motivated and what have you, they've got the recent history of being left out. All of that, I think, is perfectly fine. But if Texas loses, I don't think it's the, well, we didn't want to be here syndrome.
1,000%. I don't think it's a situation where you have bowl games where a team just obviously doesn't want to show up, right? There's a ton of personal pride to play for if you're the Texas Longhorns. Like I said, you want to avenge your one loss. You want to win the SEC in year one and prove all those naysayers wrong. But I think that Kirby is going to just rack it up that motivation a little bit more this week. And if Georgia gets out to a lead like they did in Austin, I think you could see that play out a little bit more. I think Georgia could keep their foot on the gas pedal a little bit more. And Texas might just a little bit in their minds think, okay, we're going to host a playoff game next in a couple weeks. We're going to just mentally be there for a little bit. And that could be enough for Georgia to hold on for a win or go through. Just want to remind everybody a little bit about the first game, though. It was 30-15 Georgia in Austin. None of the three quarterbacks that played all that well. There were a lot of turnovers. It was really sloppy. It was a defense first game. But Georgia held Texas to their lowest scoring and yardage output since the TCU game in 2022. That was just an ugly 10-7 final on TCU's way to the college football playoff. I don't know that we'll see another just pure defensive slugfest like that, but the reason on the field, you mentioned this a little bit, Mitch, the reason on the field that I'm going to pick Georgia, outside of all the intrinsic stuff, outside of all the motivation stuff, the Kirby rat poison, I'm picking Georgia because I trust Carson Beck right now more than I trust Quinn Ewers. Quinn has not looked good. He could have had A&M completely on the ropes. He could have made A&M lose that game 34-0 if it weren't for his 2 red zone turnovers last week, guys. I know one wasn't completely his fault. It was a tip ball, but the fumble was 100% on him. And Carson Beck, to his credit, since the Ole Miss game when everybody, including all 3 of us on this show, were just trashing him, making sure that we got our takes out there, that he was very overrated, he has answered that call the last 3 games of the season. He has 313 yards per game, 11 touchdowns, not just any interceptions, no total turnovers in the last 3 games that Georgia's played. Carson Beck is playing a lot better than Quinn Ewers right now. Injury notwithstanding, obviously, with Quinn Ewers, but Carson Beck's just frankly playing better, and I trust him more to win this game on a neutral field, neutral, quote unquote, in Atlanta.
What I do wonder is Pete Kwiatkowski is one of the best at positioning his linebackers and safeties into throwing lanes and confusing the quarterback as to where his eyes need to be looking and where those throws need to actually go. And that's what we saw Carson Beck struggle with all year long, was disguised coverages. The speed of that Texas secondary, even if they're not necessarily fooling Carson Beck, and listen, maybe that's easier than some. It's become quite apparent he doesn't really love football. He says he doesn't watch football at all in his free time.
That was concerning. That kit that came out this week.
Yeah, man.
Not a good look, especially as the NFL draft nears.
Not a good look to say that this guy doesn't just eat, sleep, dream ball. But I am concerned about that. I feel like, not turning it over against Georgia Tech, and I love Georgia Tech. Brent Key, hello, big supporter, is one thing. Not turning it over against the Texas secondary, the top scoring defense in the country, one of the best, the top total passing defense in the country for the Longhorns, that's going to be quite another thing. I will say, give Carson Beck his flowers, and let's start talking about the NFL draft once again. If he is able to dissect that Texas defense, I think that's when you start to have that conversation, but I'm going to make him prove it to me first.
I want to ask a quick question on this because I just thought about this. If Texas loses this game, so if they don't show up, Georgia does their thing. If Texas loses this game, they're probably the 5 seed, right? Because they'll drop down. They'll be ahead of Penn State or Oregon, or I guess Oregon could, keep the 5 seed if they lose that one. But
probably 6 because of Notre Dame. I don't see Notre Dame dropping this week.
Okay, so if that's the case, then maybe move. But if you're Texas, you have the opportunity at the 5 seed, like if that was the case and everyone kind of scoots down one because you have to drop out. If that's the case, I almost think that's a better lane for them. Obviously, people talking about wanting the 5 seed. Why would you want to be the 2 seed and go have to like rematch Georgia according to this current thing? Or, if Ohio State slides up into that because Georgia loses the championship game or something like that. Why would you want that matchup, even with the first round bye, as opposed to maybe saying, in the current bracket, you're getting Arizona State, then Boise State, then you get to go play Oregon after that in the semifinals. In my opinion, I think Texas might have a better shot losing this game, having to go through an easier path if they do end up in that 5 seed. I don't know if that's, similar opinion or whatever else. Obviously, they want to win this game. Obviously, they want to win the SEC and get there. But obviously, that's true, right? Nobody's saying they don't want to win the game. But I wonder if that's not the better path for them overall, finding their way through the easier part of the bracket.
Certainly an argument. I don't know that. It's impossible to know what they're thinking on the inside. And if you gave Sark truth serum, what he would say. Certainly an argument for that. A lot has been made about that path argument as the auto bids from the Big 12 and the ACC look to be significantly weaker than playing a team that might have lost. But you never know. Maybe there's an Indiana matchup, right, that they're not that scared of. Maybe they're like it's impossible to know until the bracket is actually on the paper, and we won't know that till long after these games have played.
Gracious, how about